Welcome back, everyone, to the One Line Away podcast. I am one of your hosts, Tyler Weber.
And this is Cassie Weber. And in this episode, we're going to be going over the topic of loss. Before we get into any of this episode, we have a couple visual updates that we just have to talk about.
Stepping up our game.
The light's finally on, guys.
Woo!
We are also recording in the daylight. This is something that might be really difficult for us, but right now we are. So let's hope that this all goes well. And then we also have our clipboards. We are old souls. We like to have physical paper in front of us. So we have all of our notes written on here. And yeah, that's for the visual updates. Also, there is a disclaimer for this episode. Tyler is still recovering from having the nasty flu that's going around. So his voice is messed up. If there's any coughing in the video, just please disregard it.
Just bear with
me. We're going to do our best, but the podcast must move on. We have so much in the works and planned, so we got to keep going.
We got work to do.
We got to keep going.
We got to keep it going. And let's just kind of get into it. Let's get into some of the experiences that you've had and take it away.
Just as much as he's experienced every loss that we've experienced up until this point, there is a disconnect when it comes to the physical loss of a pregnancy. And unfortunately, my body has gone through a lot of loss. Any type of loss is far too many than anyone should ever experience. So I wanted to go over, in case someone has experienced loss. Now, if you haven't experienced loss before, you are just as much in this community as anyone else, but in something that we have walked through and been through. So I really wanted to discuss what loss looks like in the physical capacity. My experience has been very different from loss to loss. It started with our ectopic pregnancy loss, and that was, to this day, one of the most horrific and devastating losses that we've experienced. With that loss, I went under emergency surgery, and so the physical recovery of that was it was much more difficult than I anticipated. My body was exhausted and sore, and I had post-op and was on heavy medication for the first week. I honestly don't think on the emotional side of it, I had processed what had happened. There was a lot that went on just to get from my body going into shock and rupturing to going home after surgery. I've also experienced a textbook miscarriage where you get to your 6 weeks and you lose the pregnancy. And that part physically is grueling. And if you've been through any type of miscarriage, you know that the physical part is far worse than what people discuss. All of that is so hard because you're trying to mentally be okay, but you're reminded every time you go to the restroom or every time you have that cramp, you're reminded of what's going on.
You're going into the unknown.
Yeah.
Especially on the first one.
Right.
We were told something by the doctor, oh, it's just going to pass, blah, blah, blah. And you don't know what that means, right? You get told this information of what to look for when you are going through this, or what to look for. Like, I hate to be so blunt and direct, but in the toilet.
Right.
And you're like, is that real?
There's also something called a chemical loss, and I've actually had a few of those. Those are really hard because you can easily miss those. In my experience, I didn't deal with the physical attributes to what a textbook miscarriage looks like and feels like. And then you go into embryo loss. Embryo loss is insane. Your body's already going through so much. I would say physically, I was already in pain and already going through physical detriment through the entire IVF process. So obviously every loss is different just with the story, but also physically. And so I hope you could kind of get a feel for what that looks like for both. Now, for the emotional side of loss, that I don't even think I could articulate in one episode. The emotions were definitely different from loss to loss. With the ectopic, my emotions came on later. I just did not wrap myself around the emotional side of it until I was recovered physically from the surgery. That part was so heavy and so hard. For the chemical pregnancies, we were definitely trying. And so I was looking for that positive pregnancy test, which is why I think I caught the chemicals that I have so far. And then, of course, with the embryo losses, you are being tested up the wazoo, and you're waiting and you're watching and you're on speed dial waiting to see whether or not that embryo stuck or embryos stuck. I can't really fit my emotions into a box, but you deal with so many different emotions, and that's just part of it. There's guilt, there's fear, there's frustration, anger, there's lack of understanding,
Shame.
so much shame. And shame is something that will forever follow me, I think, to be honest.
Well, it's part of the
Shame
self-love that we talked about last week.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily that you're just like, oh, screw you. It's just like your love for yourself. You're like, why? Why can't I do this?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Sometimes you are not meant to understand the things that you're trying to understand. Sometimes it's just bigger than what you are capable of processing or wrapping your head around, and that's okay. Now, I was extremely lucky to have the support system that I had and still have to this day after every loss. If you are confused or looking for guidance on how to deal with accepting help or accepting support while you're going through loss, that's going to be very personal and very different from couple to couple or from loss to loss or person to person. What worked for me was the people that approached me with, just tell me what you need and I'll be there. A lot of my support system actually isn't in the state, so that makes it a little bit more difficult. So that really was, text messages and things that were sent to me through my email or mailed to me. I received a surprise package from a organization that my sister has a connection with, and it's a beautiful organization. And I received a beautiful box with just little memoirs. There was books and essential oils and a candle and words of affirmations. There was a little like burp cloth. There was a really beautiful, sweet little angel teddy bear in there. And that moved mountains for me. I don't know what it was about that box, but that care box I have kept and will forever keep. And that was something that I really appreciated. What doesn't work is people expecting you to move on with your life as they think would be the right way to go about it. I think that's when you go into very murky water. If someone's listening to this and they haven't experienced loss, and maybe someone in their life has or is currently going through a loss, I think my biggest piece of advice is to not have expectations on that person going through the loss. If they take forever to respond back to you, that's just what it is. If they don't know what they need, but you feel like you know their heart and you want to treat them in a certain way, do that. I think the best thing that you can do is find a way to validate what they're going through.
So I got a question for you. And this is a question as a husband, for the husband, to the wife.
Okay.
So what is something that the husbands can do and kind of help the wife?
There was times that I just wanted to talk about it, and I probably talked about it in the same way 10 times. But I think that that's something so validating, is just letting the words flow. Something that you did really well and have done really well up until this point is making sure that life is taken care of while I can't deal. I think the validation in itself is saying, I don't know what you're going through physically, but I want to walk this walk with you in whatever way you need me to. Mm-hmm. You're the one that knows the private parts, the intimate parts of that loss. And so I think that that's huge.
This is something 3.5 years ago. Obviously, I didn't know exactly how. I did what I thought was best. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure there's husbands out there that are doing the same thing, that are trying to be like, how the heck do I try to make this in any way better, right? It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be 100%. But how can I make this moment better in such a crappy situation?
Yeah, I think something I wanted to bring up is there was times where in order for him to keep up with life, he had to go to work. Like he couldn't dwell and be with me when I was home. And so being alone for me was honestly really hard in certain losses. I just was not in the right frame of mind. And so I knew myself that I didn't feel right. I didn't like being alone. Sometimes you want to be alone. And I definitely experienced that too. But for me, the more loss that we experienced, the darker it felt and the more scared I was to be alone. There is a little story I want to share that means a lot to me to this day. We have a German Shepherd, and in our topic, when that's a whole long story, but there was a moment where my body had tried to miscarry. I went to go use the restroom, and it was terrifying what my body was trying to release. And I will never forget that my dog, his name's Roper, he sat right in front of me, like right here. And I was crying and I was screaming and I was, oh, so filled with so much sadness. And he just like licked my face like a popsicle. Like I just will never forget that moment when my dog was there for me when I needed to not be alone. I was so scared in that moment. And that story means so much to me.
That's an awesome story.
Yeah.
So loss for us just doesn't start and stop at the physical side of it. Loss means so much more than babies you've lost.
The life that you envisioned is gone. It'll never be the same. And for that alone, you can't do it alone. There is so many more things that loss can affect in your life than what we'll even talk about in this episode. But there's some pressing things that came to our hearts when we were going through our outline of this episode. Loss changes who you are from within. It takes a piece of your heart that you can never get back. You can heal, you can mend, but it will never come back.
We all have our scars, right?
Yeah.
If you have like scars on your skin, you just have scars on your heart.
Yeah.
Right? They're always going to be on your heart. Like, not everyone sees that, but it's always going to be with us, right? No matter if you've had one miscarriage or how many you've had, like, every single one is with you.
Yeah.
And that's how I think of it.
Loss of control is a really big one.
Yeah. I mean, geez, I'm 30 now. And I kind of, when we first started, I was 26.
Yeah.
27. So I was 100% thinking that I was going to have kids by now. But it's the loss of control. It's not, we are in zero control now.
Yeah.
And it is heartbreaking. There's another scar on the heart.
Yeah.
I feel like it all adds up to just scars on hearts, in my opinion now.
I think loss of your future is another big one.
Yeah,
you lose so much of what you thought your life would look like, and a lot of people do get to check boxes off in the order that they've wanted to. Now you're lucky if you get to do it in that way. When we look at what we thought our life would look like now, we did a lot of things in our lives to set up having a child. If that was the room, if that was your job, if that was your finances, we had tried to do all the right things so that it could support our next step in life and what felt like our next dream, our next goal in life. It's just devastating. It's devastating when you lose that lookout on your future and not just, this is now our sit and we're done. We still don't know what the next step looks like. We don't know what's in store, and that's just where we're at. Mm-hmm. There's so much privilege that comes with a natural and a normal pregnancy. You have these things that you almost take for granted in the beginning, and getting to tell your husband or getting to tell your parents or your siblings, and that part can be really difficult to walk through, knowing that you'll never get that again.
You said that it's kind of like that specialness and sweetness has kind of been ripped away from us.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of thinking of it from I'm going to say a positive side of, don't you think the next time that we get to like tell our parents, or the first time, tell our parents or closest friends and stuff, that it'll be like even sweeter because everyone knows what we've been through, right?
Well,
This is
definitely.
kind of a two-parter. Like, they know what we've been through, and it won't be like, in my mind, it won't be the the casual like, oh, are you guys ready for pregnancy, right? It
That's a good
won't.
point.
It'll
Yeah.
be like, oh, we know they're freaking ready.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what
That's
I
a
mean?
good point. That's a good point.
That's when I come with it. Yeah, like, we don't get the surprise effect of like, oh, we didn't know you were trying, but they know that we've been trying.
And wanting
We've put
this.
in. We've been wanting it. We've been putting in all this effort. We've been putting in all this time. We've been putting in all this money. We've
Money.
been putting in all this everything. So they're like, oh my gosh, like,
This
this
is
is
the
almost,
battle of our life.
yeah,
This is the fight for our life.
exactly. And I
Honestly.
honestly do think like people will show up and be like, it won't be the everyday questions of, oh, good luck. It's like, oh, we know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the people in our lives that truly love us and truly want the best for us and want this just as much as we want this. I think that when that time does come, I can't even wait for that. I can't even allow myself to think about it because it looks so good. And I think that that's scary because I feel like I've never allowed myself
I
up
don't
until
think
this
we've
point
ever had this
to talk
conversation.
about like like it will happen. And, that shame has followed me of like, maybe I don't deserve to experience this ever. We have to believe, and it's an everyday battle. We have to believe that our time will come. Because what would it be worth fighting and doing what we're doing, just like this podcast, if we gave up?
Mm-hmm.
I do hope that we get to take some of this back
Mm-hmm.
someday.
One thing that how we've honored our losses is, I think, fantastic. And I'm gonna let you kind of dive deeper into it.
Now, just because those losses are gone, something that was so important to me and to Tyler was honoring every single one of them in our own way. I have kept quite a lot. And I think I've kept a lot because it's definitely part of our journey. Something that's a little bit sad, but very beautiful as well, is when we experienced our ectopic loss. I had gotten a butterfly tattoo on my ankle. And if you don't know, butterflies are a very big symbol in the infertility world for obvious reasons. It honors and resembles your loss. I got that one. And of course, that's very special to me. But on the morbid side of it, I had no clue what was to come with how much loss, at what capacity we would be experiencing. And so I ended up getting a bouquet of flowers. I wanted to have a bouquet that resembled all of them. That bouquet is on my arm and it's forget me not flowers. And again, that's another huge symbol in the infertility world of loss. For me, tattoos are something that was very healing and very worthy. Talking about my losses at times was what was so healing, and then there was times where I just couldn't deal, and that's going to be ever changing for me, I think. And I think for you, if you're walking that type of a journey with us, it is ever changing. You just don't know when you'll want to talk about them or not. But something that has always felt right is to talk about them when I want to talk about them. There's something in our house that is a permanent structure, if you will. It's a picture frame that I actually was gifted from one of my sister's best friends. This piece of artwork is, I'll try to put it up in the video or somewhere on socials or tag the creator, the artist, but it resembles Tyler and I and our loss in our faith. And it is something that has brought me so much comfort and peace and sometimes sadness, but it just makes me feel like they are okay and they're taken care of and they feel worthy. If you've made it to the end of this episode, we just want to thank you. Thank you for listening to this. This topic is pretty hard, and we just wanted to share where our hearts were on this topic and hope that it brings you some comfort, some guidance on both sides of it. So we appreciate you guys as always, and make sure that you follow us on all of our platforms to stay tuned on every episode that we drop. Thank you again.
See you on the next one.
Have a good one. Bye, guys.